Hey guys, what is up? Zane here, and welcome to another story time. And in today's story time, I'm gonna be talking about when I was absolutely wrong. So I'm just saying this because I don't know why I'm saying this, but this was the girl who was in my English class, and she was the girl with the see-through clothing. I don't want to get into that in today's video, but I do want to talk a little bit about her. So this has to go with how I was wrong, okay? And by the title, it's literally saying how I was wrong, and I don't know why it took me so long. It literally took me forever to realize she was right. But because I didn't really agree with it at the time, like, no, there's no way. And it only took me after running 20 miles to figure out, yep, it's true. So anyways, to what this is, it's about like the first mile being the hardest. And this one's going to be kind of short because, this video probably won't be that long. But yeah, she was completely right. I am actually surprised. And it's because like I didn't think like, 1 mile. I don't know why. Like I thought like 1 mile wasn't that hard. I mean, it's granted it's not. Like it's like literally the hardest mile out of like all of my runs that I've done. So to essentially to what she said was 1 mile is like a hard mile. And I'm like, at the time I didn't agree, but now, since I'm a lot more knowledgeable, I'm like, wait a minute, she's actually right. Because for some reason, the first mile starting off of every run is always the hardest. It's always hard to start the first mile, to want to do it, and to just get that first mile over with. But once you do that first mile, it just gets easier. I don't know why this is the case, but especially the fact that it took me so long to realize that. After like running 20 miles, I'm like, yeah, the first mile is the hardest mile because it's like the starting mile, the starting to the journey, as I would say, the starting to the venture off into the runs. Yeah, I don't know why it took me so long. I'm like still trying to contemplate to why it took me so long to understand that. But yeah, this is like kind of like left me dumbfounded. I'm like, she was right. Like, I didn't think that like 1 mile was hard, right? And I don't think it's like the hardest thing in the world. I think that anybody can run 1 mile, but like it is the hardest mile out of any of my runs that I've done. And like I don't know why. It's just the first mile, but past the first mile, it only gets easier. I don't know why that's the case, but it is. And I can say that because I have ran my longest run recently, which was 30 miles, and oh my gosh, was that pain. And actually, let me transition that into my 10-mile run. I think that was a really good transition, and then I will get into my 30-mile run later on because that's still a work in progress with one of my goals for next year. And I will keep that under wraps because I want to have that as its own individual video. But anyway, so my first 10-mile run, man, I don't know why I remember it so vividly. It was like felt as if it was yesterday. But I mean it really does because I don't know why time's like a bullet, it flies by fast. But yeah, this run that I did, it was like crazy, like 10 miles. It's like, dang. But when I ran my first 10-mile run, oh dude, my legs were sore because I've never ran that far before, and I did, and I'm like, wow, I did that. And it's just crazy to think about, like, wow, I ran 10 miles, like, dang. But after it, my legs were sore, and I do remember, like, vividly, like, straight after that, I went to go and get a haircut. So I I don't know why I'm like, yeah, you know what? Let's get a haircut now. Since my legs are already sore, let's make them even more sore and just go get a haircut. Let's walk around some more. And I did the same thing with like my first 20-mile run as well. Like I literally like went to like Thanksgiving, right? And then I was just like jumping around on the trampoline all day like an idiot. But that's besides the point, okay? The point is this girl was right, okay? If she's watching this and you know who you are, you were right. You were right. You were right about the miles, okay? The first mile is always the hardest mile. Beyond that, though, it gets really easy. I wouldn't say it's like the easiest thing in the world, I'm not going to say that because that's obviously stupid. But the first mile is always the hardest. But beyond that, it gets only easier. I don't know why this is the case. Trust me, if I knew how that was or like why that was, I would be explaining right now, but I unfortunately can't. So yes, that is the case. So that was my first time learning a lesson like that, and I don't know why it took so. It literally took me since 2017, 2018ish, all the way to like 2019 to learn that lesson. And I'm like, wow, that took like 2 years to learn. But yeah, it's just an interesting lesson I learned, and this is all on personal preference. Like from me just running on like the first mile is always the hardest. I could like find out later on that another mile is even harder. I mean, past 20 miles it gets pretty difficult, but not as difficult as the first mile because it's like the starting mile. It's like the starting to the adventure. But anyways, yeah, that lesson took me so long to learn, and yes, this was the same girl in that dress story time and all that. And by the way, here's a little tidbit for the dress story time. So that girl in that story time, actually I forgot to say this. When I went to the dance in like my other story time, because I did that, I saw her there too, and yeah, you can imagine, like, yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna leave it at that, and I'm just gonna say this lesson took me so long to learn, and I'm like dumbfounded because of how long it took me to learn this lesson. I'm like, what? Like, it's an obvious lesson, but it's like, what? I guess I had to really test my limits first, and I'm like, yep, the first mile is always the hardest, and it's always because the first mile is like the starting point. If you don't start the first mile, then you won't be able to do the second mile, the third mile, the fourth. But it's always the first mile that's hardest. Beyond that, it gets a lot easier. So I don't know why the first mile is always the most difficult, but after that, it gradually gets easier. But anyways, as usual, have yourselves a damn good one, and I hope you did enjoy this story time. I know I did keep it kind of short in today's video, and for good reason. And all I have to say is, I don't know why it took me so long to learn this lesson, like literally a few years just to learn this one lesson, which is kind of common sense. But yeah, well, I wouldn't say common sense, but yeah, I'm just surprised that it took me this long to learn that lesson. So. And also, I know I didn't need to give the information that she was the same girl with the dress. I didn't need to say that. But, as humans, we like to give information that makes no sense. So that's what I did. But all jokes aside, I will see you guys in the next one. And later, you mad lads.
All this love in my heart, I'm sure it's enough to make a start. All it takes is a little, some on your part.